So yeah, everyone very, very welcome along to our second Connacht squad online, obviously. So hopefully we'll be back on track in the near future, hopefully. But we've an excellent lineup this morning. So we're very lucky to have Evan Lynch, sports nutritionist, on with us to give us a talk about all things nutrition and all things sporting nutrition for us. So please feel free to take notes. Get your brains thinking for some questions at the end. Evan's always happy to answer a few questions. And also he comes from a very good sporting background himself. He was a international race walker as well. So he's definitely one of the best in the business at what he does. And we're very fortunate to have Evan on. So just like to thank Evan for coming on as well. As always, there's the chat function at the bottom if you need to drop in any questions at any stage, and we can get to them. And if not, we'll have the Q&A after the presentation. Once we're finished up with Evan, we're also going to have Cian McPhillips on. Cian is our Longford and Irish 800 metre superstar at the minute. And Bashir will be going through a bit of a Q&A with him. So again, if you have any questions at any stage, just let us know either through the chat box and we'll get them answered for you. And at that, I'll leave it to Evan. I'm sure Evan will give a much better introduction to himself and all his achievements than I could ever do. But the one thing I do remember is that I'm pretty sure Evan and I were on either a Celtic Games team or a schools team way back in like 2010 or something crazy. So yeah, we go back well. Yes, that was it, Glasgow.
Yeah.
So that's a nice bit of fun fact there for you. So anyway, Evan, over to you, pal.
No problem. Cheers, Connor. That's a decade ago, by the way. That's a decade ago at this stage. All right, so lads, today I'm going to talk for about an hour. Could be longer depending on the questions you have. During the talk, if you have questions, I'll see them pop up. I'll try and keep them to the end unless they're directly pertinent to what I'm talking about. So I'll zip on with it. So when I talk about nutrition, it's kind of a broad term. What do I mean? What does nutrition entail? So it's everything you do, everything you eat. It's recovery, fueling. It's what you eat before bed. It's what you drink. Before we get into that, I'm going to do a very quick intro. Connor did steal my introduction. So my name is Evan. I am a sports nutrition consultant and I'm also a trained dietitian. And what I do myself is I do a lot of work for Athletics Ireland, Cycling Ireland, and I do some consultancy work with DCU Athletics. On a one-to-one basis, I work with quite a lot of professional athletes. Some of them are Olympians, from track and field, marathon running, cycling to triathlon. That's the bulk of my work, actually. And I was a former international race walker. Didn't get as far as I would have liked, but that's why I'm here talking to younger athletes, so you guys don't make some of the mistakes I made. Just a heads up, a lot of the things I would caution against doing, I have personally done as a juvenile or a teenage athlete from a nutrition point of view. I did all of the fad diets. I did all of the, skipping foods, good food, bad food, focusing on my weight and all that. You don't need to do all that. Nutrition can be very simple. There's just a few basic points you'll want to pay attention to. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, so that's me. And just to outline what we're going to go through. Important micronutrients, and we're going to look at some macronutrients as well. So what are the key things for an athlete? What do you need to maybe your mind when you're getting through the day? How to fuel training. So there are a couple of screenshot slides, and I will be sending on the slides to Connor, and I think this is going to be recorded as well. So this will be a good thing to refer back to, and I'll tell you what those slides are when we get to them. I don't ever recommend a juvenile or youth athlete tracks using something like MyFitnessPal or Libro. There's no requirement to do that. So having reference sheets and pages like what you're going to see coming up is much more useful. And how to fuel training, real simple framework. It's very, very easy to implement. You just need to know how to do it. We're going to look at like a healthy lunchbox, how to lay out your day. I know most of you are probably doing school from home and you're probably just in your kitchen all day, but you still need to have some sort of structure to get from morning to night. Otherwise, you just kind of drift and you don't get any of your nutritional boxes ticked. So that's quite important to get on top of. We're going to look at some supplements, and again, how would I put this? If we have a pyramid, okay, a pyramid of things that are useful for athletes: sleep, nutrition, consistent training. Then you have S&C, maybe, you know, looking after your training gear, anything like that. Supplements are at the very top of that pyramid. So what I'm trying to say, I suppose, and I think the lads working for AI might agree, if you don't train consistently, taking a vitamin D supplement will not make you have PBs. You know, taking beetroot juice or creatine or anything like that, you're not skipping training if you're doing that. It just helps. It can help you get the benefit out of the training you do. Okay, so that's just an important thing to note. We're also going to look at a nutrition approach as well, and a little bit on sleep, so you get the full holistic viewpoint. There's no point in talking about food just in terms of sports. It is a behavior. It is something you do predominantly outside of sports. It's one of those, you know, 24-hour elements of your sporting approach. Okay, so that's what we're going to do, and I'll get on with it. I'll start talking about it now. First thing we're going to talk about are carbohydrates. For the most part, juvenile and youth athletes, when you're training, you're probably not hanging around. You're going to be working pretty hard. I presume most of you are runners, throwers, jumpers, sprinters. The sport you do probably requires exercise of a decent intensity, or at least a decent duration, you know, if you're a race walker or a long distance runner. Increases in, I suppose, how long you're training for, how often and how hard you're training increase your carbohydrate requirements. Okay, so we have our first set of numbers coming up here. 4 to 5 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. That's your baseline. Don't worry about that for now. We'll deal with that in a couple of minutes. But as an athlete, that's what you want to get at an absolute minimum. Okay. Carbs are absolutely vital for recovery. So I hope some of you are doing biology or home economics or something like that, or you're just interested enough to read about this outside of school. In your body, you have kind of a storage form of carbohydrates. It's called glycogen. When your glycogen tank starts to drop, which it does when you exercise or train, your body needs to fill that up to recover. So the best way to think about it is, the lower my glycogen is, the less capable I am of exercising. So filling that up is important for being able to exercise again. And there's actually research to show that the lower your glycogen is, the harder exercise feels. The less tolerant you are to higher intensities, and the less of a muscle protein synthesis response you actually have. So it's actually really it's really deep rooted in its importance. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, I kind of just touched on it. Exercise performance is heavily predicated on your carbohydrate intake, and we're going to look at this a little bit later on. I'm going to ask a question of you guys, and I hope you'll be nice and interactive and answer. But generally speaking, if you compare two athletes doing a race or a time trial, one who is carbed up, the other who is not, who do you think will win? This has actually been researched. They have actual performance data on this. I'm not going to give you the answer. We might look at it later on, but think about it. It's just food for thought, I suppose, pardon the pun. So just to put some visuals on what I've just said, why does it matter? When your glycogen level drops, so that's what this arrow denotes here, perceived exertion increases. So if you're, let's say, going on a long run, an easy recovery run, or a walk, let's say you're in 5-minute Ks at 150 beats a minute, glycogen levels being low, at that exact same conditions, it feels much harder. It feels 10%, 20% harder. So your easy work is not so easy anymore from a psychological point of view, which is pretty valid. Your brain governs everything your body does. Exercise tolerance drops. So if you have a key session, time trial session, it's race day, it's an S&C workout, it's not going to go as well as it could. And as a result, overall performance drops. So if you are a student athlete, which you should be, at the age you guys are for the most part, you're using your brain to do schoolwork outside of training. And that's important because your brain uses a lot of glucose as well if you're actually focusing on what you're doing as opposed to flicking away on Facebook. But that's probably a different conversation. The point I'm trying to get at is, from a stressor point of view on your body, you guys have two jobs. Being a student, being an athlete, both of them demand glycogen, so you need to be fueled up, or you're going to see performance drops in not one but both of those areas of your life. Okay, so really important, get the carbs in. What do I mean when I say carbohydrates? So this is your first screenshot slide. I'm not going to go through every bit of food on this slide, but go back to the first number I gave you, 4 to 5 grams per kg per day, right? I'm 80 kilos. So on a normal day, I need around 320, 400 grams of carbohydrates. So I'll refer to this slide and I'll say, okay, how can I make that up? If I have something here from the 60-gram cohort at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I get 2 or 3 30-gram snacks. And if I have these little 15-gram adjuncts, like a little glass of juice, add some honey to my porridge, have a small bit of fruit in the evening, I'll find that I meet my numbers. So you guys can go away and work that out for yourself. That's a screenshotter. I would be looking at this slide. You will get the slides, as I said. So that's important. That's one way to make your nutrition very, very easy, very manageable. The best way to conceptualize it is it's a puzzle. You have to find out how to make the pieces fit for you. Okay? I hope this makes sense. If you guys have questions, do fire them into the chat box and I will answer them right now if it's pertinent, or at the end in a bit of a Q&A. Okay, next on the docket, protein. Mostly people are aware that protein is how you recover, build muscle and grow. You're predominantly made of protein, by the way. Your hair, your eyes, your fingernails, various forms of proteins make up you. So it makes sense that if you exercise a lot, your metabolism is working harder, you have a higher degree of muscle turnover, there's a higher demand for protein in athletes, and it is quantified. I'll give you the number in a minute. The guys watching this, and girls, I suppose, you have an extra demand on your body that, say, senior athletes who I mostly work with wouldn't, in the fact that you're growing. So you guys are inadvertently tacking on 1 or 2 pounds of muscle mass every few months, depending on how old you are, without even trying. That takes a lot of raw materials. So you need protein to do that, particularly if you're active outside of it. So what do the numbers look like? If you're a female athlete, you want to get a minimum of 1.6 grams per kg per day. That's endurance or power. So that's kind of your reference range there for a female athlete. Notice that it's homogeneous and that for males, there are different reference ranges. Reason being, there's one key difference between lads and girls. Lads don't have menstrual cycles for the most part, to my knowledge. Why am I saying this? Why is it relevant? There are certain phases of a girl's menstrual cycle where her metabolic rate will be through the roof. It's the second half, just before a period will come around, and protein requirements are a minimum of 1.6 grams per kg per day. In my experience, not all teenagers track this, so it's better to get that minimum intake in all the time to limit risk of injuries, poor recovery, and illness kicking in. Remember, I said everything is made of protein. That includes white blood cells and other immune factors, so you do need to get enough in the door. For lads, then, it's a little bit more precise. Male endurance athletes, so anything really middle distance and up, 1.2 to 1.4 grams per kg per day. So I would fall into that category, or at least I would have, and that gets me around 96 to about 110 grams a day. You know what you weigh. You can see your numbers. It's just simple multiplication. Male power athletes then have the same requirement as a female athlete. So, protein needs will vary for a number of reasons. Number 1 is puberty and growth. Number 2 is training load. The third one there, which I haven't mentioned, injury and calorie deficit. So you might actually require 2 to 2.4 grams per kg of body weight per day if you're injured, or if you're trying to lose weight. You guys shouldn't be trying to lose weight. That's just there just to, it's the last case where protein intake is relevant for an athlete. But for you, for any athlete watching this, we're only talking about injury for this intake number, and I'll explain why. I think Connor might be able to attest to this a little bit better. I think he has a master's degree in something like this. For the most part, when you're injured, think about it, you have damaged tissue. Your body has to physically remake that tissue again. So if you have ligament tears in your shoulder, you've destroyed your cartilage, you have a grade 1 hamstring tear, it doesn't just magically fix itself. That requires little amino acids to be built, adhere together, make up that new structure and become functional. You need a lot of protein to do that for a couple of weeks. So 2 to 2.4 grams of protein per kg body weight per day. That's not in the slides. So if you are injured, please do take that down, and that will actually help your recovery. Okay. There are other things related to an injury, but they're not super evidence-based. It kind of it's not consistently proven that they're helpful, but the high protein 100%. Okay, so that's the numbers. That's why we use it. This slide is your second screenshot slide. This is where you get your protein in. So if you see what your numbers are, what your requirements are, you're referring to this and seeing how you can get it in. The protein quality increases as we go across the slide from plants towards meat. Plant-based products don't always have all of the amino acids in them, so you need all 20 amino acids in a food product for it to be considered high quality, or at the very least it has to have an appreciable amount of the essential amino acids. There's 8 of them, the ones you cannot make inside your own body, so you need to get them from food. Okay, they're kind of like vitamins, you need to get them in, you cannot make them endogenously. So why is meat ranked higher than dairy? They're all good protein sources. Meat simply have more protein per serving than a portion of dairy would, but gram for gram, they're absolutely equal. Okay, but just I suppose for reference, you'd have to drink about 700 ml of milk to get the protein equivalent of a chicken breast. So it's just not very practical. I don't see too many people lining up to do that. So just one thing to note there on protein, if you are a plant-based athlete, or if you're lactose intolerant, or if you don't eat dairy, what you need to do is make sure that you have soya products. Okay, so for meat replacements, you're looking at tofu, tempeh, soya or corn mince. Those are all soya derivatives. They taste a little bit different. If you get the mince-based products, you can at least mix them into what would be like normal palatable dishes like lasagnas or stir fries or bolognese, and you don't have to have like a different diet to that of your family. You can integrate. Okay, that's important. For replacing dairy, if you're lactose intolerant, the gold standard replacement is fortified soya, so underline fortified there. Lots of teenage athletes are guilty of not getting enough calcium, vitamin D, iron. Female athletes as well, high risk of losing vitamin B12 in their diets, particularly if you're plant-based or you're not eating dairy. That's really important for reasons that will be explained later, but just take it as a fact for now. You don't want to be missing those things. So generally speaking, good rule of thumb, if you're having soya products or normal dairy, make sure it's fortified. Having more super milk, the Alpro fortified, or Aldi and Lidl, I think they call it Mega Milk. I think you guys know the stuff I'm talking about. That's what you want. And last note then on protein, and then we're moving on to fats. You want to combine different types of plant-based products. Again, this is only if you're a plant-based athlete. Everyone else can tune out for a second. You need to have what's called complementary proteins. So let's say you're making dinner. How do I make sure that all of my 20 amino acids are here so I can build some muscle from this? All you need to do, have some rice, combine it with some beans. That's your standard pairing. So any kind of Mexican food will probably foot the bill there. If you're not a big fan of that, you can get some edamame beans, and you can get some mixed vegetables, and you can get some kidney beans. That's your full complement right there. You can add some cashew nuts to a vegetable stir fry, that will get it up. Or you can add something called nutritional yeast. That is a very good protein source. Very simple idea. A baked jacket potato with baked beans on it. Very, very simple. Get to your 20 amino acids there. Okay, so that is really important. And just to note, if you don't get the 20 in, you don't build muscle. So that also means you don't get the 20 in, you likely lose muscle. So for a growing athlete, that's probably the worst case scenario. That means losses in strength, increased injury risk, probable effect on your biomechanics, depending on how weak you might be or where your strength is at. And I can see Connor nodding there. This is definitely more his area, the biomechanics type of thing, but that is really important. Okay. So we're going to talk about fats next. People do need fat. Contrary to popular belief, eating fat does not make you gain weight. That's kind of a calorie balance thing. Fats are a group of chemical compounds. They're called lipids. Actually, if you want to study science, they're not referred to as fats. We call them lipids. In everyday language, they're called fats. And athletes do need them for a lot of reasons, particularly if you're growing. You need around 30% of your energy from fats. That's approximate. That does vary from time to time. I would have some athletes on temporarily high fat diets for very specific reasons. Always senior athletes, sometimes on low fat diets. That's always temporary. Most people are around 30% most of the time. That's the way it should be. Fats make your steroid and sex hormones. So as you're growing and developing, puberty is pretty vague. We see the effect. You physically get bigger, you get stronger and faster, but what drives it? Steroid and sex hormones drive it. Testosterones, growth hormones, estradiols, progesterones, they're all actually made from fat. So you need to have a certain amount of fat in your diet so you can actually synthesize these compounds, so you can develop, mature properly, and in a reproductive sense as well. So it's important for reasons outside of sport to get this in. To make it relevant to sport, fat can attenuate inflammatory responses. So what does that mean? You go do a hard session and your calves are sore the next day. That's DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. That's inflammatory cytokines and neutrophils flooding into your muscles to try and fix them and repair them. When you exercise, you damage your muscles a little bit. That's what stimulus is more or less referring to most of the time. Fat can help, I suppose, make that less painful, would be the easiest way to conceptualize it. So getting enough oily fish, mixed nuts, olive oils, things like that in your diet, you can train without the pain, or at least the unnecessary pain. It doesn't make the work any easier, I'm afraid. One of the most important things about fat, that's where you find dietary sources of vitamins A, D, E, and K, all of which are massively, massively important for a whole host of reasons. You use vitamin A for your sight. It's used for nervous function. You use it to absorb iron as well, actually. Vitamin D is being long linked with respiratory health. So vitamin D deficiency in athletes in Northern Europe, those guys in winter and autumn time always get upper respiratory tract infections and connective tissue injuries. Interestingly enough, there's a correlation there as well. Vitamin E is pretty much an antioxidant compound that will help you manage oxidative stress. Vitamin K, then that's more so, it's not really sports related. It helps with blood clotting factors, keeping your kidneys healthy and your bones as well. So you do need these things in your diet, okay? You find them in fat-rich foods. This is another screenshot slide. This is how to get fat into your diet. I'm not going to go down through every point on this, but generally speaking, as you're going through the day, you're trying to tick off as many of these boxes as you can. And what you will see is the fat-rich foods tend to have fantastic micronutrient profiles. So a handful of mixed nuts a day will take off 5 or 6 of your micronutrients. So probably things you've never even thought about: seleniums, zincs, magnesiums, manganese intakes. Really easy to take off. Chia and flax seeds will take care of your fiber and omega-3s whilst contributing towards your healthy fat intake. Eggs, this is always a divisive enough mention. A lot of people think eggs are bad. Eggs are absolutely fine. There is a little bit of cholesterol in eggs. It doesn't influence your actual serum cholesterol in any way, shape, or form. Not that teenagers really care about that, but you can go and tell your parents after the talk that eggs are okay. Just maybe don't fry them in oil or butter, you know, poach them or boil them, and it's absolutely grand. Okay, so that's our macronutrients. We're going to look at some frameworks now to fuel training. So putting those macronutrients to work, putting them into context. When might you look to use them? Pre-training, what might you want to do? So this is referring to maybe the 2 hour, 1 hour mark before training, depending on how your stomach is. Some people need to leave it for 3 hours. These guidelines should help manage tummy problems if anyone does suffer from them. Simple carbohydrates. You want low fiber, low fat, a little bit of caffeine if you're into that, or if it's something you habitually drink. You don't have to do it. It's not going to be a game changer or deal maker or breaker. It can just help you train a little bit better. And 5 mils per kilogram body weight of fluid over the 90-minute period before exercise. So let me explain all of those things. Simple carbs, i.e. low in fiber, so we can rapidly absorb them. If you have a high fiber meal, bowl of bran flakes, I had some Weetabix this morning. If you were to go training within 2 or 3 hours after that, there's a great chance you'd feel quite sick. Fiber and fat take up to 6 to 8 hours to break down in your tummy. So not even absorbing them, but in your actual stomach. And if you go running then, or race walking or jumping, the turbulent effects combined with the fact that your gut essentially flick off during exercise makes it very likely that you will get sick, feel sick, or get some stomach pains and toilet problems a little bit later on in the day. So if you keep your meals a little bit simpler, so no fiber, no whole meal products right before training, you'll fare a little bit better. So practically that would mean something like just a bowl of cereal. So your Rice Krispies or your Cocoa Pops in the morning if you have a big session. It's not hashtag healthy eating guidelines, but you can get your 5 a day and your fiber in after training or at other times of the day, not right around training. And that allows you to train to your utmost with no issues, and you're still going to be relatively healthy and tick all the boxes. The fluid element here, this is to achieve what's called a neutral hydration status. So for me, I would be sipping around 400 mils of water or Lucozade Sport if it was hot over an hour and a half period. So literally sipping away. But that's the volume that gets you starting training or a race perfectly hydrated. Okay, so that's important. That can be easy as a white bagel with jam, an hour and a half, 2 hours before your training session. That's all. Nothing fancy. Pretty underwhelming, I think a lot of people might say. That's all you need to do, guys. There's nothing special or secretive there. I think everyone can achieve that. That sets you up for a good training session. It can be that easy. Post-training, different story. Within 20 minutes, so there is a little bit of a window on this. Basically speaking, after you exercise, there's a couple of things that happen in your body that take a while to switch off, we'll say. So you're more sensitive to glucose absorption and transport for about 20 minutes after you stop exercising. You can jump on top of this by eating plenty of carbohydrates within that 20-minute period. So it will help you fill up your glycogen tank very quickly. If you refer back to, I was talking about glycogen, probably one of the first things I talked about, the higher or lower your glycogen is, the more able you are to train, the better, just generally speaking, the better you'll fare. So you'll fill that tank up much quicker by sticking to these guidelines and getting the carbs in ASAP. So you want around 0.5 gram per kg of body weight. So that's a 40-gram dose for me. That could be something like a muju and a banana. Perfectly fine, easy to do, very, very quick and practical. If you're not a fan of muju or bananas, a bowl of cereal, some dried fruit, some Haribo jellies, it all fits the bill. It's okay to have sugary foods right after training. That's the one time where it's productive. Okay, you use sugars differently when you're physically active. Now, don't take me out of context. Don't cut off the second half of that sentence and say, Evan said eating sugary foods is okay. It's okay just after training. Okay, not sitting on the couch watching telly, not the same thing. Okay, so that's training, that's pre and post. Very, very simple. Stick to this framework. You will train and recover significantly better if you're not doing these things already. All right. How to structure your day. So this is the next 1-2 slides or something I put in most of the talks I do. I just find it to be the easiest way to get the idea across of what you need to do during the day. So for you guys, this is the school hour slide. So what do you do when you're at school or whatever you guys are doing at the moment? I don't know how you're managing. You're sticking 2 fruits into your lunchbox, and I have some clients who are student athletes, and even though they're not leaving their house, we found it helpful to go through the process of making a lunchbox and leaving it in a different room to where they study, just so it's there, it's a thing, they actually go to it and interact with it. And if you fill it up with what we're going to go through here and you aim to have it finished by the end of the school day, your nutritional intake and quality significantly increased. So you're sticking 2 fruits in there. Try to vary the color as much as you can. Eating the rainbow is something you might hear me say a couple of times before the end of the talk. Have your main bit. So, I use the example of a whole grain wrap with some chicken and some veggies in it. It can be whatever you want. It can be pasta with some spinach mixed through it. It can be a rice dish. It can be a leftover stir fry. As long as there's carbs, protein, and veg there, that's all you need. Whatever way you want to do that, that's your prerogative. A pot of yogurt, whether it be dairy-based or soya-based, to get your calcium in, your phosphorus, B12, and a protein hit. And lastly, your mixed nuts and seeds. So your micronutrients. So nuts are considered to be like nature's multivitamins by some people. So that's it. Very, very simple. Again, no exotic foods, nothing you've never heard of, no secrets. And I hope you're underwhelmed watching this talk. That means everything I suggest, it's very, very achievable. If I've mentioned anything and you're thinking, God, I've never heard of this, it's very unlikely you'll actually do it. So being practical is very, very important. So I said I was going to ask you guys a question earlier on, and I don't know, would you guys mind voting or into the chat box? What do you think? Youth, juvenile athletes, okay to skip breakfast and train fasted or not? I'll give you a minute, and then I'll tell you why I'm asking you the question. So this is a question I get asked quite a lot. A lot of people get pretty divisive about it. For you guys, the answer is pretty simple. So I think we have an answer coming in there. I'm going to wait for a few more answers. So we're, the talk is as long as you guys make it now. So if you take that got the answers coming in. That's good. That's good. Yeah. Okay. Everyone is agreeing here. That's great. So, okay, cool. I think it's a general consensus. Not skipping breakfast is probably a smart idea for a juvenile athlete. It's almost a rhetorical question. You guys should know that. Training fasted is also not the best idea for a youth or juvenile athlete. And I specify youth or juvenile. I do this with some senior athletes I work with because it's very hard on your body, okay? And when you're finished growing, when you're finished developing, you can kind of push the envelope of, I suppose, nutrition protocols and training, because you're not, you're not looking to grow 2 centimeters a year, or your body isn't changing dramatically year on year. For you guys to skip breakfast or do fasted training, it would do a number of things. Number 1, your glycogen would disappear. Number 2, it'll take 72 hours to reappear fully. So if you have a tough training session or an exam within 2 or 3 days of doing that, it's not going to go as well as it could. Number 3, you'll have suppressed your body's ability to do muscle protein synthesis because your glycogen is low. So development, growth, recovery, all absolutely trashed. Number 4, probably the most relevant for a teenage athlete, glycogen and blood sugar being low causes increased cravings. I have yet to meet a teenager who, when they get cravings, does something sensible like has a bowl of porridge or makes a sandwich, it's usually, oh, I had ice cream or Doritos or lots of chocolate. So skipping breakfast has been shown time and time again. This is for not athletes and it's for everybody, to result in increased consumption of junk food, more comfort eating, and a higher calorie intake later in the day, which can actually affect your sleep. We're going to look at sleep a little bit later on as well. So I'm glad you guys all agreed. The answer is hard pass on this, at least until you're about 22, 23, and you're more or less finished growing. If you're a senior athlete and you want to get the most out of yourself, you can give me a shout and we can show you how to do that. For now, eat your breakfast. Okay. So just to summarize it all then, this is how you might look to structure your day. Again, nothing crazy. There's no intermittent fasting. There's no specific times on this, bar the ones we had in and around training. You're having your breakfast, eat sensibly when you go to school, have a proper meal 3 hours or so before training, 2 hours if you're stuck, you can engage in that pre-training template if you only want something small there. Do your training session, recover, dinner, and this is your fluid guidelines. There's nothing crazy there, lads. That's very achievable. Following a structure like this will enable you to be more consistent. It enable you to train more to a higher degree. And crucially, you're going to be less likely to develop nutrient deficiencies. So calcium, vitamin D, that's quite common in juvenile athletes to be something that's missing, and iron as well. We'll get to that in a minute. You really do need to stay on top of that. So that's it. That's the practical bit. That's what it should look like, the end product. So a couple of supplements now, just while we're on the topic. Vitamin D between October and March. So if you're outside a lot now, and you should make a point of going outside for 30 to 60 minutes a day if you can help it, get some sunshine on your forearms and your face. That should get you enough vitamin D this time of the year, as long as the weather is okay. If you're someone who stays inside most of the time, you probably need to take a supplement all year round, but that's a general guideline. Calcium chewable, if you fall into one of these categories, you are a plant-based athlete, vegetarian or vegan, because you're not going to get calcium anywhere else. You have relative energy deficiency syndrome. You are lactose intolerant and don't eat dairy. You have amenorrhea, so that's female specific. You have lost your menstrual cycle, or if you're taking contraceptive medication. Both of those things can increase your risk of having stress fractures. Calcium supplement, smart idea. Okay, so that's that. Next one then, and this applies to everybody, cod liver or krill oil, get your omega-3s in. So I did mention chia and flax seeds earlier. They do have omega-3s, and I'm going to get a little bit scientific here. They have alpha-linoleic acid in them, which is the least bioactive of your 3 omega-3 fatty acids. If you're taking actual fish oils, or ideally eating actual fish 2-3 times a week, you're going to get your eicosahexanoic or eicosapentaenoic acids in. Those are your 2 very bioactive ones. They'll help you reduce your DOMS. They'll improve insulin sensitivity, cholesterol. Again, not that you guys care about that, but that's a good idea to do. Last 2 bits in that slide. Protein powder, really only for female or strength athletes who have higher demands. If you're really 70, 80 kilos or more and you're finding it hard to meet your requirements, protein powder just makes it practical. It's not that it's not really a supplement, it's just powdered milk. I give my daughter baby formula. It's kind of an adult version of that, basically. It's nothing synthetic, I guess. Creatine, however, would be synthetic, creatine monohydrate. People do tend to get a bit antsy about this. It gets a lot of bad press. It's probably the most studied supplement in the world alongside caffeine. Perfectly safe, and it's perfectly fine to give to athletes who are getting pretty serious, or that they're ticking all the boxes, you're nice and consistent, you're performing at a high level, and your training load is going up. Creatine 3 to 5 grams a day can help you improve your performance, has no impact on your health. It's just not okay for anyone who has a kidney problem, uncontrolled diabetes, or if you have rhabdomyolysis or have had it. All of those things affect kidney function. But for everyone else that it's relevant for, go for it. It will help your performance. that's the supplement list. You know, it's not that big, and it's not big for a reason, because you should be getting things from food. So generally speaking, food first approach is best. And that's always the case. You want the minimum amount of supplements possible in your daily diet. Okay. Sleep, then, I did promise we talk about sleep, and I probably have about 5-10 more minutes of talking. We will answer some questions then, and I think Keane will be jumping on then to answer some questions. So bear with me for another few minutes, and then I promise I'll stop talking. Okay, so just before we look at sleep, I'd like, just if the athletes can interact with me one more time, just say yes or no if you use your phone in bed or in your bedroom at nighttime. I'm just genuinely curious before I dive into the slide. It doesn't matter if you do. I used my phone in bed last night, so you know it's not a okay. So that's pretty resounding yes. We have like one no there, so that's fair play to you. Okay, cool. Okie doke. So why do you guys think I'm asking that? I assume you've probably heard this before, but I don't know if anyone's ever explained it to you. We'll look at it in a sec. So first and foremost, ditch the phone and the screens in bed. Blue light, so you're looking at a laptop or a phone now, the frequency of the wave light coming from your phone, it's the exact same as the sun. Our bodies are run off something called a circadian rhythm clock, and it's mostly influenced by how we're exposed to light and dark. So it's really interesting. If you're bored and a bit of a nerd like myself, Google chrononutrition or circadian biology. Very, very interesting. When you have a phone in your face in your dark room, what you're actually doing is you're confusing your brain. So the suprachiasmatic nuclei in your hypothalamus starts suppressing melatonin production. So that's your sleep hormone, making cortisol. That's the opposite of being asleep. And I'll show you how that affects your sleep architecture in a minute. That's number one. Get a book, not a Kindle. Kindle will be the same effect. Ditch the caffeine 6 hours before bed. So when you drink a cup of coffee, I've had 3 today, which is why I'm talking very fast, because I knew I only had limited time. Connor told me keep it to an hour minimum or maximum even. Coffee is active in your system for about 6 hours. Okay, can be a bit quicker if you're younger. Generally speaking, if you're going to go to bed at 10, you stop drinking coffee, tea at 4 o'clock, or switch to decaf at least. Warm shower an hour before bed. If you find it hard to fall asleep, that causes a big increase and then drop in your core temperature. You'll fall asleep a little bit quicker. And if you're someone who's still struggling to sleep after doing that, a magnesium supplement can help an awful lot. And last thing then, 2 kiwis or some hot chocolate 45 minutes before bed help you get off to sleep. Why is that? Both of those options have a lot of tryptophan. So tryptophan, it's one of the amino acids. You don't find it in a lot of foods in big amounts. And why it's important to have it with some sugar. So the sugar in a kiwi or in a hot chocolate, sugar increases your insulin. The insulin helps tryptophan jump into your brain, where you make melatonin out of it, or your sleep hormone. So all that process happens in about 45 to 60 minutes. So that can help your sleep quite a lot. Okay, so real simple stuff. This is a very crude outline of what sleep architecture might look like, right? I'm not very class at presentation making, so you know, this is my rendition of what sleep patterns look like. Generally, throughout the night, you'll go between light sleep down to deep sleep, up to light sleep, back to deep sleep, and so it goes in waves and cycles. If you have been on your phone, okay, you're going to spend the vast majority of your sleep up around here in light sleep, or in that kind of middle phase where you get a lot of rapid eye movement. So that's not restorative. You know, I hear it all the time. People say, I slept for 10 hours, but I'm still tired. That's a fantastic sign you get little to no deep sleep. That's where the restoration happens. If you have your mobile phone, you will not really get any deep sleep, not for a few hours into your sleep anyway. It can decrease it by about 80%. Okay, so down in that deep sleep, that's where you actually recover, where you release growth hormone. You actually make new myelin sheath on your nerves. You have neural adaptation. You make new memories. Your brain even cleans itself. It's really, really important to get that deep sleep. So literally speaking, if you're on your phone before bed, recovery is probably, you're cutting yourself off at the knees, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And it's easy to ignore it when someone just says, hey, get off your phone. But the reality is, if you're trying to be an athlete and you're trying to perform at your best, this is a surefire way to make sure that doesn't happen. Okay? So I won't talk about that anymore. That's sleep. That is, I'm not sure if this is relevant. I wanted to put this in. The last talk I did, there were some athletes who were engaging in Ramadan. I'm just going to run through it really quickly. Ramadan is very, very soon. Okay? If this is relevant for you, keep your training easy during Ramadan. So if anyone doesn't know what Ramadan is, it's a dietary practice by some religions where you don't eat during sunlight hours. So only before dusk and after dawn. Okay, so that poses some problems. If you've been paying attention to the talk up to now, that's pretty obvious why that might be a problem. Okay, nutritionally speaking, you can only look to manage this. You're not going to optimize your training. So talk to your coach, keep your training easy. Right before sundown is when you want to train. So train right before you can eat, and then nail your recovery. Big carb rich intake right after training, and a big carb rich meal before bed. Protein focused then in the morning. So something like a 2 or 3 egg omelette with some chicken, some spinach, some peppers. That could be very, very filling, and maybe have some bran flakes with it or some Weetabix to get your fiber there too. That could get you feeling full for as long as possible. Okay. So I'm not going to go into it too much. It probably doesn't apply to 99% of the people who are coming to the talks. But if there's one person, one athlete watching, and they're wondering, how am I going to get through this and train? This slide might help, or just get in touch, or get your parents to get in touch, and I'll help you out. Okay. So that is Ramadan really quickly. Nutrition approach then, this is the last slide. Something I have to reiterate to a lot of athletes is to focus on fuel. A lot of athletes focus on the opposite, cutting. How can I cut calories? How can I lose a kilo? How can I look like the Robert Heffernans of this world, or Jakob Ingebrigtsen is in great shape, whatever. And a lot of athletes will miss the point. They won't do the basics. They'll try and cut corners to a calorie deficit. That is a surefire way for going downhill, getting injured, getting sick. I'm speaking from experience. It's what put the nail in my coffin. It's what led to my injuries that I never recovered from as a first-year college athlete. Okay? Don't make my mistakes. Focus on fuel. Really, really important. It's a more winnable game as well, okay? If you're getting caught up in weight loss, you guys are probably relatively fit as is. You only have a discrete amount of weight you can lose. If you focus on fuel, on ticking the boxes, it's a game you can win time and again until the day you hang up your spikes, put the javelin in the closet, throw out the shorts, or whatever it is. You know what I mean? So focus on the winnable game. Be sport smart. As a runner, as a race walker, it's probably not your weight that's determining who's going to win. It's who is fastest, who can throw the farthest, who can jump the highest, who has the best hurdling technique. Oftentimes what you look like, or like losing a kilo or two, very little bearing on the actual end result of a race. Okay, that's something you look at as a senior athlete when you've done everything else correctly for years. So be sport smart and focus on yourself. You guys are pretty young. You can't compare yourself to a seasoned professional senior athlete who does nothing else, right? Try training for 3 hours, 4 hours a day. You probably don't have time. Guaranteed, you don't have time or energy. So you cannot compare yourself to this. It's like comparing apples and bananas. If you stay consistent, you'll eventually get to where you want to be. And the training kind of takes care of things itself. So that's more or less everything for me, lads. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, we'll belt away with them now. So yeah, that's the story.
And that was fantastic. I think, like, I've heard you speak a couple of times now, and even still, I always get something from it myself. So it's great to hear. Just a couple of questions that came in on the chat there. One, just quick one, was the hot milk before bed. Is it as good to put people to sleep as what they say?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's just comforting. The milk has some intrinsic sugars and tryptophan in it. So yeah, absolutely does the same thing. Doesn't have to be hot chocolate.
Right.
So yeah.
On to the next then. So is creatine advisable for distance athletes as well as your power athletes?
I actually do. I use it with all my endurance athletes. There's a lot of misconceptions around creatine. Yes, it can increase strength. It can increase muscle mass as well, but only if you're doing the hypertrophic gym work. So for thinking about a race walker and a distance runner, those guys aren't going to be doing max deadlifts, six rep, high weight stuff. They're doing different exercise modalities that will not result in huge muscle gain. So where creatine kicks in for an endurance athlete, if you're doing a tough session, you'll get better quality out of it, increases general strength. So, biomechanical gains for the likes for a race walker there, stronger hamstrings, really, really important. And interestingly enough, it can increase your ability to store glycogen. So if you ever plan on being a marathon runner, half marathon, ultra, 50K race walker, or 35K, I think it's going to be after Tokyo, your ability to do carb loading can be improved with creatine. And for everybody, it can increase your level of natural killer T cells. So your immune system works a slight bit better. So yes, I do. I recommend it to everybody.
One from a secret admirer there. Bashir's come in with one. Just any thoughts on kind of fast food you see with a lot of young athletes that maybe see it as a quick fix, getting food in that way, or after a good competition you might treat yourself and things that way. Just any sorts of thoughts on fast food?
After a competition, it's not the end of the world. If you're on point every day of the week, and after a competition you want to go for a pizza, that's fine. There's no point. There's no benefit of me saying no, don't do that. On paper, if nutrition was black and white, no one would ever eat fast food, no one would ever eat chocolate, but no one would be very happy. And the reality is, a meal like that after a race, the effect is negligible. It's not going to impact you as an athlete. What can be more relevant for senior athletes is drinking a lot of alcohol after a race, particularly if it's not the key race of your season, as it can hamper the adaptation you get from the race itself. But other than that, not really. I wouldn't be too hard on people for that. Day-to-day purposes, make better choices. Something like ramen, or the kind of Thai food, is a good option for fast food. Sushi is a good option for fast food. Probably things to stay away from would be just chippers or real greasy pizza joints, things like that. People know that though. If you're looking to do things yourself, get pizza bases in the supermarket, make it yourself, make your own burgers. So turkey and mince burgers are pretty class. You can make your own spice bags. That's quite easy as well. So those are I suppose my thoughts on it. I'm pretty liberal, I think, when it comes to this stuff. To be fair.
No, that's good. Good to know. If you're to train early in the morning, I suppose maybe if you didn't want a big breakfast, what sort of snack would be best to have pre-training?
Yeah, something light. I would often recommend a bowl of Rice Krispies or a banana to people training early in the morning. Again, a coffee as well if you drink coffee, just to perk you up a bit. About half an hour, 40 minutes beforehand, if you're strapped for time.
Cool. And then what about beetroot juice or beta-alanine for endurance athletes in terms of recommendations or why you would use it?
So beta-alanine, probably not for all endurance athletes. If you're a 3K steeplechaser, 1500-meter runner, yes, beta-alanine is useful for events that are less than 10 minutes in duration. You have to take about 6 grams a day 4 weeks prior to your race. It's the equivalent of a lactic acid buffer. That's more or less what it does. It increases your body's levels of carnosine. it's not an absolute requirement. It's kind of it's a nice to have if you do everything else correctly. It will not make or break you if you're not well trained. So that's a hard optional. 5K runners, 10K runners, walkers, not relevant. So middle distance lads can benefit. For beetroot juice, if you're well trained, it actually has no effect. So I read in a research paper there, the cutoff point is a VO2 max of 55. So if you're getting national level medals, you probably don't need it. If you're running reasonable times for your age group, it's probably not going to benefit you. The reality of beetroot juice is the people it will benefit are those who are not adapted to exercise. So the more you train, the more consistently you train, the more ingrained the vasodilation response to exercise is, or your arteries widen quicker and more effectively and efficiently than non-athletes. So beetroot juice is something I would use with a beginner or someone who's new to sports or getting back fit again to help that process along. For people watching this, I would say no. It also doesn't taste very nice. So, hard pass again for me there.
Good stuff. And I think that's a really, really key point that you've kind of said throughout as well, just in terms of you have to do the basics right. So get your food right, you're sleeping right, and you're training right. And there's no point taking all these supplements when you're not doing the basics. So that's definitely a good message for the athletes. Another one here, just about eating before a race. I suppose it's probably similar to training, but maybe if you just say something like a field eventer who could be out there for quite a while, or a distance runner who's quite a long time of competition and things.
Mm-hmm. So the guidelines for racing are the exact same for training. So that fuel framework, exactly that. Obviously, you might leave to go to the competition venue a good while before your race starts. So having like a decent sized carb-rich breakfast, pancakes, porridge, all of those things are absolutely fine. Nothing specific, just don't do anything new. If you're a jumper or a thrower, or kind of a multi-eventer, and your event, the actual time it takes to do your event involves lots of sitting around, things like dried fruits, some Haribo jellies, your nuts, protein bars, energy bars in your gear bag is a good idea. Something you can kind of nibble away at. Particularly jumping events can last for an hour and a half, 2 hours, depending. So that would be the only real difference. If you're doing heats and stuff like that, directly after your first heat, something that you can digest quickly, a Lucozade Sport and a banana. And depending on how long you have then between your next event, if you have more than 2 hours, get something small to eat, some simple carbs. If you have 3 or 4 hours, have a meal if you can when your tummy settles down.
Great. Are BCAs advisable for juvenile athletes? And then just
no, they're not really advisable. The only time BCAs are useful are in clinical settings if you have someone who has sarcopenia as a result of diseases. So that's severe vicious muscle loss, meaning the person can hardly stand up. BCAs are useful there. For you guys, just to put this into context, if you have a glass of milk, the glass of milk will have more BCAAs than the serving of BCAAs you get from a BCAA supplement. So that's a bit of a tongue twister. BCAAs are 3 of 20 amino acids. They also are the most common amino acids found in food. So leucine is the big one. Leucine is one of 3 BCAAs. In chicken, leucine compromises half the whole protein content of what you find in chicken. So definitely not. Just get whey protein or chocolate milk, and it's better actually.
Yeah. And you find that a lot of the time. Again, it's your food first type thing. Yeah.
100%.
Is there any changes to your diet or nutrition, maybe depending on where you are in your season? So pre-season versus maybe your competition kind of peak season.
Kind of a hard enough question to answer. Like, not really anything we're talking about unless your training volume increases or the intensity dramatically increases. So if you're sticking to that baseline, like just working with some of the athletes I work with, in winter time, they might be training 20 hours a week. Big carb requirements there. when their training gets more specific, the sessions are smaller and further apart. So carb requirements actually drop. It all depends on volume. So the more you're training in terms of how long you're spending training, the more carbs you require. Otherwise, carb level drops. But that would be about it. If you're doing things like warm weather training and altitude training, hydration protocols do differ there, and sometimes iron supplements are relevant for altitude athletes, but nothing really we're talking about for a juvenile athlete, to be honest.
Okay. Yeah, no, very good. So we have loads of questions, so I might just take one more, and what we can do is we'll send around an FAQ afterwards or something like that for some of the top ones.
Yeah.
So yeah, lots of them about kind of your multi-eventers where you're competing for a long time. So you spoke about that, kind of keeping your snacks in your bag and things. Just one here I think is kind of important to touch on would be about trying to bulk or trying to make a weight and things, a calorie surplus. Any recommendations around that? Now I know it's probably not advisable with juveniles, but any?
So if you're trying to up the calorie intake, probably the handiest thing to do is focus on your healthy fats, avocados, nuts, peanut butters, adding some honey or syrup to your porridge in the morning, having a glass of juice during the day, making a hot chocolate or a cappuccino with full fat milk. All of those things will add a surprisingly high amount of calories to your diet. So that's probably the easiest way to do it, to get it up there.
Okay. That's brilliant. So yeah, we've a few more there, but what I'll do is we might put an FAQ around afterwards to any of the questions that we've missed. Otherwise, I know we could sit here and chat all day with you. But that was fantastic, Evan. Really appreciate you coming on, and I know the athletes will too. So definitely a lot to be gotten out of there. So thanks very much, Evan.
No problem. Cheers for having me, man. Good luck.
So we now will have Bashir to come on for a bit there. He's going to introduce our next section.
Okay, thank you very much, Connor. You hear me okay? Yeah?
All good.
Good. I've got a few questions and answers. And again, if you get any more, do type them up in the chat box. I've got about 8 here. But if there are any more, by all means, pop them in the chat box. Keen, are you there? Can you make yourself visible? Lovely. Thanks, Keen. Great stuff. How are you?
Very good, thanks. How are you?
Excellent. I'm not bad at all, thanks. It's a lovely sunny day, and hopefully we'll have lots more to look forward to, lots of competition, and hopefully you're in good health.
I am, yeah.
Excellent.
Out of quarantine and back training.
Brilliant. And you've had a heck of a winter. I know I was chatting to Joe Ryan over the winter, and he was telling me that things were going well, and he was telling me about one or two of the sessions you'd done, and we were just really chewing the fat as old people do, talking about you. I probably chatted to your dad as well, but anyway, thanks very much for coming on, Keen. Delighted that you're here, and I know that the Connacht squad, they're absolutely privileged to have you on, because your performances over the winter were absolutely tip top. And if I'll just crack on with one or two of these questions that we've had coming in. First of all, I know that you've been around for a good few years. You started when you were quite young, didn't you, in athletics? Do you want to just remind us how old you were when you started?
Yeah, I think I had my first race at the Community Games field, I think when I was 4 years old. And then I joined, the Longford Little Athletics, I think when I was about maybe 5 or 6. And then kind of a year after that, kind of graduated to the athletic club, where I started actually doing, training sessions, maybe once a week. Pretty light stuff, because I was still very young. But I would have been about 8 years old, I think, at the time.
Gotcha. And you were playing lots of other sport. I think I heard you were playing midfield in soccer. Any other sports you play other than soccer?
Yeah, I think running was only kind of my third sport up until I was about 12 or 13 when I started winning things. I played an awful lot of Gaelic football and soccer.
Right, I've got you. And in terms of winning things, you've been winning cross country, and you predominantly focused on the 1500. And the great thing about this 800, meter performances. It's you know, it's not your key event, but tell us about that. You know, I mean, that's a big surprise that, you know, one, that you did the 800, and two, that I don't know. Tell us about that 800 at the micromeet in particular.
Yeah, obviously like 800 and 1500 meter training are kind of somewhat similar. You know, the way when you're training for one, you know, it benefits both. And I would always open the season, you know, with the fast 800 before moving on to the 1500, kind of like a rust buster. But yeah, I was kind of looking at the people who were doing the 1500, like Andrew Coscoran and Paul Robinson, and they were running, you know, really fast times. So I thought if I wanted to make the Europeans, it might be a bit more clear cut if I did the 800, because I didn't think there was going to be that many that would run the standard. And I ran a 600 meters time trial in like 1:16 about 2-3 weeks before that. So I knew I was kind of in good nick to try and run a quick 800.
Great. And I know we've had one or two questions, so I'll just jump into one of these here because it's relevant now. What training session would you consider is the most important part of your training, particularly for the 800?
Ooh, I would say we do an awful lot of work in the winter time. Especially this winter, my mileage has kind of gone up a bit. It's consistently about the mid to high 40s, and sometimes going into 50s. So obviously that's very important. And when I'm doing the runs, it's very important to get your strides in afterwards. Kind of just nothing crazy, just, you know, 30-meter strides at max effort kind of thing over the winter. That kind of keeps your top end speed. When you're not doing speed sessions on track, they're very important. So it's not a huge transition then when you go into speed sessions in January or whatever. I would say like a staple workout of ours would be something like 8x1K on a Saturday over the winter, with like a 60-second break, and they'd often be in like about something like 3:10. So, you know, they'd be really tough. I would really struggle with them. I don't really like that session at all, but that would be ideal for building that endurance that you need for both the 800 and the 1500. Because there's kind of two types of athlete that run the 800. There's kind of the speed guys that are coming from a 400-meter base, and then there's people like me that are more strength based, who benefit from having, like, you know, the way a race that's run fairly evenly and fast from the gun. So yeah, no, that would be the main workout that we would do. We would do that nearly every Saturday, all over the winter, and then most Tuesdays, actually, even in the spring.
Gotcha. Yeah. What can I say? You know, that's a tough old session for sure. What's your favourite session? I think if 8x1K is your toughest session, and is that on the track or on the dirt or around the Mullingar?
That'd be on the canal.
On the
canal. That'd be on the canal, so it's kind of like gravel.
Right, gravel canal. Okay. And what's your favourite session then, if that's the worst one or the toughest?
Something really short, fast, with a really long recovery on a track. So I think we did one session, this might have been a year or two ago. It was like split sixes, so you do a 400 and then a really long break, like 6 to 8 minutes, and then a 200. And then, there's a 400, and then it might have been like a 1 minute break, and then 200, and then like an 8 minute break, and you just do that again, and that's the session over with. But the splits will be really quick. Like the 400s could be in, like, you know, 52, I think, at the time back then, and then the 200 is in like 27. So, you know, it was a really tough session, but I would prefer that. Maybe it's because the weather's much better, I don't know, at that time of year, but I really prefer that kind of session over the long stuff.
At 27, I dare say there's a good bit of lactate pushing through the leg. Does that lactate go anywhere else other than just the legs?
Well, I throw it up afterwards, usually after those sessions. That's probably where it ends up.
No, I mean, the reason I asked that is, as I know, when I've worked with guys on 800, they've talked about feeling lactate in the face, in the shoulders, in the ears. Would you agree with that, or?
I haven't really experienced that. Now, sometimes in the arms, yeah, you might feel it, but no, that's when you know it's really tough now, when you can feel it up there. But no, mostly the legs.
Okay. So the next question kind of moves nicely onto that 146 at the micro meet. Tell us about that through your eyes.
I knew it was going to be a tough race because obviously Mark English was in it and John Fitzsimons, and it would be my training partner. It wasn't really more of a race, it was more of a time trial for me. I was just trying to get the standard, which was, I think it was 148 low. And we had Kevin Woods pacing us. Me and John had that arranged beforehand. And then my job was just to slide in behind Kevin, and he would just tow us through to about 600 or 500. I think he made it to about 450 because we were in good nick. And then, it was just up to me then to try and finish it out. And then obviously Mark kind of surged by me with about 200 to go. And but again, the way you only have kind of one move in the 800 because it takes up a lot of effort to get that acceleration to go by someone, especially indoors. So he was kind of dying a bit on the final straight, and that kind of allowed me to to get back up to him. But again, I would kind of be like that kind of athlete anyway, because I would be more the strength based, so I'd be able to kind of keep fairly even pace the whole way through.
Brilliant. And to watch it, as as I'm sure and everybody on here will testify, it was the race of the championships. Records all over the place, not just an under 20 but an under 23 record, and an absolute vintage performance that a lot of us will never forget. There was one other question. What were the COVID routines like at the micro meet, and how did they compare to the COVID routines at Torun in Poland? Because a lot of the athletes on this will probably head to a major championship in the next year or two, and I dare say they might have to deal with some of those COVID things. What did you have to deal with? What were the challenges there, Keane?
Athletics Ireland were sending out surveys left, right, and centre, in the weeks previous to it, to identify any symptoms. And then, once we were there, we had to actually get a test before we could even enter the building. And it was fairly strict, you couldn't go back to your car or anything afterwards. Once you had the test, you just had to wait outside until you got the all clear to go in. And then once you were in there, you weren't allowed on the track. You had to go into the gym, and you just had to wait there and kind of warm up there before you got a chance to actually go out. But obviously it was really well ran, and it wasn't that difficult because there's only very few people there. I think in our race there was only about maybe 5 runners, so it wasn't too bad. And obviously there was only one race at the track at any one time, so it was run pretty well. Obviously when we went to Poland, then it was more of the same. We had to a load of surveys before 2 weeks prior, and then we had to get a test before we left. Then we had to get a test, I think, when we got there, and there was an awful lot of queuing around just waiting for the results. But look, it was very well ran, and it was more or less the same as the Athletics Ireland, just with more people.
Gotcha. And the sign of a champion is those people that can just get on with it and not let it phase them too much. But I dare say you must have seen 1 or 2 people getting a bit grumpy, either in Dublin or in Poland, with the frustration of it.
It was fairly frustrating because we were spending an awful lot of time on our feet, just waiting for these tests and, missing out on meals and things like that. But sure, everyone's going through the same, so it's really, you're at no disadvantage.
Yeah, I quite agree with you. Yeah, that's the way to look at it. It's the same for everybody, and everybody's equally disadvantaged as a result of it. So yeah, real positive psychology there. Don't forget that. Always the positives when everybody's looking at the negatives. Great stuff, Keane. And then what about the rooming situation and the eating? Because the routines there might have been different. Was there much difference there? And again, I'm thinking about our juniors in Connacht who might be going on to a championship later in the year.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
I was talking about the rooming situation and also the eating routines and protocols.
The rooming, obviously, because COVID, most of us were given our own room, except with one or two exceptions because they just didn't have the space. But yeah, no, the hotels was really nice. The food was actually fantastic, I have to say. They had a great selection, and the way it's kind of very similar to what we would have here. The way they're just for breakfast, scrambled eggs, sausages, pancakes, that kind of thing. And the way for dinner, just potatoes, pasta, and some other meat. So there's lots of options actually. The only other championship that I'd been at was the European Youth Championships in Hungary. That wasn't near as good. Now that was a bit of a struggle to try and find something that wouldn't ruin your stomach before the race. But no, this time was very nice.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, that's good. And really, I was just thinking about the number of people allowed into the breakfast room, social distancing and all that kind of thing, and the teams, the mixing of the teams or non-mixing, etc. Anything to add on?
There was. No, I don't think there was any limit. I think we were probably divided out among hotels, and I think there might have been about 3 or 4 other teams staying in the same hotel as us. I think we were there with the French and the British, and maybe the Serbs. But yeah, no, I think there wasn't really much social distancing around the breakfast or dinner or anything because you can't. There's a limited number of seats, so you have to sit next to people. But you just had your mask on when you weren't eating, and that was it.
Yeah, and you'd all tested negative anyway, so there was less of a need for it. Great stuff. I have got a question here related to food from Danielle, and it says, before the most important races, what types of food do you prefer to eat?
I would typically go. An awful lot of it depends on when you're racing. I would typically not have any food within 2 hours of the start time of the race, and not a whole lot of water either. I'd have most of my water drank at that stage. I'd just be taking an odd sip here and there, just so my stomach isn't upset, like going into it. If the race is somewhere in the evening and I'm having it in the morning, I might have eggs and toast, but I try and keep everything as plain as possible. If the way. Even when I was over there in Poland, I think most of my races were on at about 8 o'clock, which is a really difficult time because you have to have it as well. So it's trying to decide, what to have that wouldn't upset you. But yeah, just anything plain, plain sandwich, a pancake with a bit of butter, or just a small bowl of pasta. But I wouldn't be too fond of trying anything new now on the day of a race. I try and keep all my food outside the 2 hours and keep it as plain as possible.
Gotcha. No, I'm sure Evan's listening and is probably thinking, I don't know if you've got anything to add on that, Evan. And while Evan's thinking about that, Keane, did you see the Evan presentation?
I think I saw the last 10 minutes.
Yeah. Okay.
I went back from the session.
And it may be that we'll get the slides and you'll get a chance to see those. But there are a lot of really useful things on sleeping patterns and how you enhance your nutrition, optimize it ultimately, and certainly the way you're heading, you'll be looking to be right up there with the other top teenagers. And I think Ingebrigtsen's an old man now. He's not a teenager anymore. But there's that guy in America we were talking about. We're trying to remember his name. Who was the guy who won the Division 1 in America? Can you remember? The 19-year-old. No?
No, I can't remember now.
Oh, okay. Not to worry. So I'm looking at these questions now, and I think we've probably answered most of them. Somebody said, what kind of training was you doing when you were around about 14 years of age? You're doing kind of 40 to 45 miles a week these days at 18?
Yeah. When I was 14, I think I had only just stopped football and soccer. And in the early days, that was what my training consisted of. Just, we'd having football matches every day at school and that kind of thing, and you'd be completely wrecked. But I think so that gave me all the endurance that I needed and the speed work I needed. At 14, I think Joe Ryan had taken me over at that stage So I might have been doing, oh God, 20 miles a week, maybe something like that. I'm not even sure was it even that much, even maybe even less. But again, I would at that age I was the type of athlete, you know, if I wasn't too pushed, you know, the way if I didn't want to do an easy run, felt a bit tired, I'd just leave it off. I wasn't taking it too seriously.
And these days, do you have one rest day or two rest days? I mean, obviously race week you might have more.
I think last year I had 2 rest days. This year I think it's 1. So yeah, but again, the other day is just an easy running, so it's not too hard.
Gotcha. How do you deal with nerves before competition? That's one from Liam.
Yeah, I don't get that nervous. I would usually actually, when I was younger, I get far more nervous for a soccer match or a Gaelic match because, you know, the way other people are relying on you not screwing up. But, you know, for the running, it's fairly straightforward. You know, you just do whatever you can, and there's really nothing else you can do. So it's just as long as you know that you've pushed yourself all the way at the end, you know, that's it. So I think that makes it much easier to deal with when you know that you're not trying to have a whole list of things like not to do and what to do, and that you just run the race as fast as you can. But yeah, no, it can be. I was a little bit nervous, obviously, when you're lining up against guys that are running, you know, 144s or 145s. You're going to be nervous, but again, I think the fact that I was quite young gave me an awful lot of insulation from that. You know, the way it was kind of nothing was really expected of you, so that again helped with the nerves. But yeah, no, even I think I've learned to deal with it a lot better than when I was younger. I think my very first race was when I was under 11s. I think I went down to Wexford, I think in the Curragh, and I was so nervous I couldn't eat anything before the race, and I ended up coming like 54th, even though I probably should have been up near the medals, near the top 12 anyway. But you know, over time, the more you do it, the more you realize that it's just a race, and there's going to be another one, sure, another 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, no, I quite agree. I'm sure a lot of us listening to you can relate to that. So what was it like putting on that Irish vest in Poland? Your first senior vest?
No, it was very cool, I have to say. Now, you know, the way I obviously didn't put the vest on until I was, you know, about to go in to the warm up area. So, you know, the way it's really cool now when you're there in the warm up area and you're seeing all these world champions and world medalists, you know, warming up beside you, and you're there with the Irish team, and obviously you're heading in to the call room, you know, with your vest on, and you're going up against guys like Jamie Webb was in my semi-final, and I think can't really pronounce the name, Borakovsky, I think it might be. I think he won silver at the race. So just shows you the kind of the talent that you're going up against. But just to be able to be out there, you know, have that opportunity so young is something really special.
Yeah, no, it's proud day for all involved. And you're working with Joe Ryan. How often do you see him on a weekly basis or a monthly basis? Because he's not in Longford, is he?
Yeah, I'm from Longford, so and he's based in Mullingar. So I wouldn't do any of my easy runs in Mullingar. I'd obviously do them all here. I'm in Leaving Cert, like, so I can't really be traveling over. I have to keep that to a minimum. But I would see him for every session, more or less. He's always there on a Tuesday and on a Saturday. And almost all the time, I think we have a pretty big group of guys to train with. I think most of them are based in Dublin now. I think I'm the only one left actually still in school. So there's not that many to train with at the minute, but that'll change once we get back to the summer. So yeah, twice a week I'd see Joe.
Good. And have you? Well, I dare say you've done a fair few Zoom calls, and there'll be a fair few more to come. Just checking down these questions. Can you see any more questions I've missed there, Connor? The shoes. What shoes do you wear, Keane?
What shoes do I wear? I wear the Nike Pegasus for my training sessions, and I wear Nike Vomeros for my easy runs. Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure you're supposed to change the shoes every month and a half. According to Andrew Coskren was telling me this over in Poland. I'm not sure I completely agree with that. I probably have these runners now for say nearly about a year. The one before,
Andrew's probably doing twice your mileage though, isn't he, in fairness?
Probably is, yeah, I'd say so. And for races, I think I recently purchased a pair of the Dragonflies spikes. It's kind of controversial topic at the minute, but I think, I don't think they give you a huge difference. I would probably maybe about half a second over 800. But again, I don't even think they're built for 800. The Dragonflies, I think Nike have a different spike out for that distance. But yeah, I think the main difference that you get from the Dragonflies is the recovery. Your legs seem to feel much fresher after a race. So they mightn't give you a whole lot of juice in the race, but definitely after you can really see the benefit, which obviously is very helpful if you're at a championship when you have heats and finals and that.
Right. This is one from Mark Davis. What do you plan to change this year to get ready for the Eurocross? Assuming that you're going to be focusing on the Eurocross, we're looking well ahead, but hopefully you will be at the Eurocross for the Dublin European Championships. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, that'll definitely be a big target for me. Hopefully we can get a good team result, and I'd be hoping to be somewhere near or within the medals for that race. Again, I think I'm not even sure what distance it is, probably 6K or something like that. So my mileage will probably go up a little bit in the summer. Actually, no, not in the summer. When I get back, which I usually get back running after my break in about late August, mid to late August. So yeah, no, I'd say I'll just keep doing the same thing. Obviously, cross country wouldn't be my main focus. I'm obviously more focused on the 800 and the 1500. So I won't be sacrificing that, just for the Eurocross. So my training, it won't change massively.
I must admit, when I first started reading that question, I thought they were talking about the European Championships this year, but it could be, and you might not have thought about it yet, that you're on the relay team because, the 2K event, you might be more suited to that. And, we have got a lot of great middle distance runners here in Ireland and a lot of great middle distance cross country runners. So that might be something to think about to whet your appetite.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
And coming back to the track season now, I mean, what will your focus be? From what you've said, we expect it to be the 1500, but I don't know. I mean, those 800s are going pretty well.
Yeah, I know. I still think over a championship, I think the 1500 might be my better distance. But so I will definitely do probably more 800s this year than I've ever done to try and take a crack at that Olympic standard. I think it's 1:45.2, so I'm less than a second off it. So I'll definitely have a go, see can I get it. But at the European Juniors, which is going to be the main focus of the season, that's probably going to run the 1500. But the way doing 800s is almost perfect training for a championship 1500, because in order to win those at a European level, you usually have to run a 53-second last lap anyway. So that kind of speed endurance that you get from running 800s will certainly be very beneficial there.
Absolutely. Connor, was there anything else on the questions? I think I've probably exhausted most of the questions I've seen.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Covered quite a lot there, and it's great to get the insight from you, Cian. It's really interesting. I suppose one thing is just what's a typical day for you like between studying for your leaving cert and then training and everything, and keeping in mind we've lockdown and everything. How much has it changed your kind of day-to-day life?
Yeah, obviously when I'm in school, it's just up at 7 o'clock, get the school day, and the second the school is over, just race out to the gym, get changed and do my easy running, and then just race home, have dinner, and you're kind of in for the night then. Because it gets too dark in the wintertime, back then in the wintertime, to do the easy runs that late in the evening. I think I was also doing about up until November, Athletics Ireland had like a Zoom call where they would do S&C sessions, but had to quit that after November because I was doing the run, racing home, and I wouldn't even have time for dinner. I'd have to go straight on the Zoom call for like a 90-minute Zoom session. So that was not going to last too long. I was going to get burnt out fairly quick. But yeah, no, I think lockdown has actually been really beneficial for me. I think once school went online, it kind of gives you a lot more freedom. I think back in March, last March when we went into lockdown, you know, I was able to, because everything had been cancelled, I was able to kind of up my training a bit. Like I was doing about 30 miles a week, maybe low 30s. But after lockdown, I could kind of slowly start building it up because I knew I didn't have any races to kind of prepare for. So I think by the end of lockdown, I was again up into the mid to high 40s. And I got that done for, you know, about maybe 5 months, you know, so that kind of level of, without actually getting injured at all through lockdown. So that level of consistency, you know, that it meant that actually when I was in August, I was in really, really good shape. And then I was unfortunate. I had a bit of a calf strain just the day before I was supposed to race in Belfast, doing a 1500, which was a shame because I was going for a sub 340 at that race, but that was my target. But yeah, no, I think I'm really starting to see the benefits of all that consistency and mileage now in my racing. You know, the way I normally wouldn't be running next or near this quick this early on. But I think because I've had such a great foundation built over the past year, it's really started to help.
Yeah, I think it's great to hear that as well, in terms of using that time wisely, as you said, just kind of building it up and making better efficiency of your time and stuff. So one kind of good one to, almost happy one to end on, would be any sort of advice for our young athletes on here who are kind of maybe a few years behind you, coming up and trying to aim to get where you are.
Yeah, I would say it depends, you know, on what age you are. Obviously, when I was younger, I was not really taking it too seriously. But again, you do have to realize that if you are going to try and go on and compete at a European level, you're going to have to become far more serious about it and far more consistent with your training. But again, you have to realize that it is a sport and it is supposed to be fun, even though it is quite a tough sport. Yeah, look, I think one thing that really helped me was getting into a group of people to train with. Obviously, Joe Ryan has a fantastic group of lads that, you know, from all distances that, you know, I can train with anytime I need to. And I think that's probably the main reason that I'm still in the sport. I think if I was still at Longford, I was running out of people to train with, and I probably wouldn't have progressed to the level I'm at now. But again, that's obviously to do with having the group there and having, you know, support from home, and obviously having fantastic training from Joe. As you get older, I think it would be really helpful to make sure you're on top of the small stuff, stuff that you mightn't see as too important, like S&C, for example. That's something that I'm absolutely shocking with. I haven't really had time to do it this year at all. But even on that online Zoom call, I mean, I have an awful lot of work to do to get up to the level of even other athletes that were doing it, even athletes that were younger than me were better at it. So that's something that's going to be a main focus for me over the next few years. But again, you know, the younger you can do it at a reasonable level, obviously don't jump into it and do anything crazy. Again, it's all about building up, and that's the same with your mileage as well. Make sure that you don't go too high too young. You really don't need to be running huge miles when you're 15 or 16. Just a reasonable level, and just keep building it up slowly. And what else? I would say blood tests is another thing that I would try and stay on top of. I think back when I was under 16, under 17, I was coming about third and fourths in all Ireland's, which wouldn't have been, and I was running very poorly in training. But what I discovered was my iron level was about 7.1. I think it's supposed to be between about 50 and 300, something like that. So 7 was obviously extremely low. And I had another injury back 3 years ago now. It was a stress reaction. So it put me out for about 3 weeks just before the EYOF. But I think that was due to a low bone density issue. That was because I was deficient in calcium. But yeah, you really need to kind of stay on top of blood tests and make sure that that kind of thing doesn't happen, because it is preventable. And what else? I would say, again, just basic discipline in terms of when you have a training session. There's a lot of young athletes that I see tend to go too hard in the session. They always treat it like a race, you know, and not just young athletes, to be honest, even lads that are way older than me do it as well. But they really need to kind of learn to pull back and just stick to what the schedule says. You know, your coach knows best. And don't be afraid to take off days when you get older. I know some athletes, they kind of get a bit paranoid about taking off days and that kind of thing. Feel like they're going to lose out. But you know, to be honest, I would take some 2 or 3 days off if necessary if I was just feeling a bit tired. But I think that really benefits me because it kind of kept me fresh all through the years. That when I did turn up for a race, I wasn't fatigued. So that'd be the main things I'd focus on.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Keenan. It is really great to hear you talk. I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for
I think
having me.
that's kind of it on our question side. So no, again, thanks very much, Keen. It's great to get this insight from an athlete so young but at such a great stage in their career and progressing well. And I'm sure everyone here will wish you the best going forward for the rest of 2021, and we'll be supporting you along the way.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
No worries.
Thanks again, Keen.
Always welcome back.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, back to you, Connor. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks again.
So that's it from us today, everyone. Hope you really enjoyed it. I know I found it amazing just listening to Evan and Keane there. It's great to have these people to come in and talk to you. So I hope you got a lot out of it. We'll be in touch in the next few days with the recording of the sessions and the slides from Evan and stuff. So like both the lads said, if you have questions at all, get on to us and we can fire them on to Evan or whichever way that way is. But yeah, that's it from us. Again, we'll be in touch soon about our next session. Hope you're all keeping well. Hope you're keeping on top of your training as best you can. And that's it from us today. So well done and thanks for coming on. And again, if you need any help, we're here and that's what we're here for. So don't be afraid to reach out. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.